Right. Okay. So we'll get going, guys. We have a couple of people still joining. Cian will let them in as we go, but we'll dig into it. So welcome everybody again to talk number 3 at this stage of the under 25, under 30 speaker series. We really appreciate you all joining us from far and wide. I think we even have Jen Thompson here joining us from Long Island in New York. So we have people from all over the world. But look, I mean, this one is going to be a slightly different format to the last. Instead of just a standard talk, there'll be we kind of want a little bit more interaction with this one. So we'll guide us through kind of the conversation throughout the talk. We're going to cover, the likes of the history of the Cup, how we got to the Cup, to the 36th America's Cup that's happening at the moment. And we'll look into some of the technicalities of the current Cup as well. But then we have the likes of Prof, from North Sales on the call a little bit later on. He's going to give us a little bit of an insight into the sales. If we have enough time, we'll cover a couple of scenarios that come up, and we have Gemma on the call, who's a fantastic umpire, and he'll give us his insight right there if we have enough time. But yeah, feel free to chime in or post in the chat as we go. And yeah, we'll kind of kick it off. So I think, obviously, yeah, this is Cian, by the way, Cian. So we are going to be talking you through all this. Just to kick things off at the start, we'll cover a little bit of the history of the Cup. So one of the most fascinating things I think about the Cup really is that it's the oldest trophy in international sport. It's been around since as I said, it's the oldest, and it's been around since
1851,
I think it was. And it's an interesting one because this Cup especially, is an interesting one because that first ever America's Cup was between the Royal Yacht Squadron and the New York Yacht Club. And this year, again, we had people from the Royal Yacht Squadron and the New York Yacht Club, again, teams from both. So it's a little bit of history repeating itself all these years later. The Cup basically is a match racing regatta between two international yacht clubs. Between the challenger of record, which is the team challenging for the America's Cup, and the defender. So the defender is obviously the team that won the Cup in the previous cycle, and they get to make the rules and decide the boats and the location and everything for the America's Cup going forward. So in terms of all the way back then, we'll go all the way back then. The first ever America's Cup was a race. Actually, it was more of an offshore or a fleet race around the Isle of Wight in the United Kingdom, which was won in the end by the Yacht America, which was from the New York Yacht Club, and they actually went through because they won. Obviously, they got to dictate the rules, and they decided, we'll call the America's Cup. We'll call the Cup the America's Cup after the yacht that won it first. So that's where the name came from. It wasn't actually made in America or wasn't founded in America. It was just named after the first yacht that ever won it, which was the American schooner.
And yeah, back then, you have to think back then. That's these days. Obviously, the boats, they can be loaded on container ships, shipped around the world. So there's no hampering the boat. You can design your boat for the race location. But back then, the boats not only had to race on the location, but they had to get there in the first place. So the designers in the first days were designing boats to travel halfway across the world to then race in a cup race to defend the titles. And it was quite spectacular.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you think about the lack of technology back then, it was a very physical, intense effort to get the whole crew over. And back in the day, they were real mariners. They were all people who were in the Navy and the likes of that. They weren't the athletes that you see around today. So in terms of kind of the continuation of the competition, then, it was only ever a race between two boats really, and that kind of continued from 1870 all the way up until all the way until 1967. There's only two teams competing for the America's Cup. But then after that, there was so much interest from international teams. Basically, the defenders were, at the time, the New York Yacht Club, they said in 1970, look, we'll open this up. We want more teams competing for the Cup. So what they did is they came up with this concept called the Challenger Series, which is basically where multiple teams battle it out to gain the right to challenge for the America's Cup. And that's what we know today as the the one that's happening at the
Challenger
moment,
Series,
the Challenge
yeah,
Series,
which is now called the
Louis Vuitton Cup. Sorry.
Yeah.
So that's what's happening at the moment. That's the racing that you're watching at the moment, is the Louis Vuitton Cup, and that's basically at the moment. Now in this cycle, there's obviously only 3 teams battling it out. Well, now only 2 teams because the Americans got knocked out.
Fortunately.
And yeah, so sorry. So yeah. So up until then, basically, yeah, then there was multiple teams challenging for the cup, and over time, you know, there was more and more interest, and more teams got involved. And look, like now where we're at today, where every cycle there's completely new teams and different people challenging for the cup, and it made it a lot more interesting to the worldwide audience because more teams from more countries were challenging. So these boats that you can actually see up on your screen here now are the J class yachts. Now, after a couple of years, you know, the rules changed, so there was design parameters, and these are, I think, some of the most famous yachts that ever competed for the America's Cup. So the J class yachts back in the day, you know, I think are they 100? I think they range from about 100 to 120 feet.
Yeah, absolutely, a minimum.
And they were incredible yachts, you know, and you can see from here now they've actually been reborn and have a new life as super yachts for the rich and famous.
I think we've all seen photos around the world.
Yeah, exactly. We've all seen these photos, you know. I'm not sure. Yeah, so like this is them now, you know, with as prophecy now, the lovely 3D sails there, you know. They're a world away from where they were back in the day, and so you know they've really come a long way since. And I think, you know, the J classes were around kind of around the 1930s. So even you can think kind of 80 years ago, 90 years ago, you know, the technology was still pretty primitive in terms of what we're used to these days. So after the 12 meters really kind of came, I guess, you know, the next iteration, and that was the 12-meter yachts. And I think that's where a lot of people on this call would have seen your first, you know, live racing of the America's Cup. The 12 meters, I think, where the cup really started to gain this proper international recognition as a really famous, you know, sporting trophy. So the 12 meters were around for years, I think, you know, all the way from, as you can see here, now these have been restored, but they're modern day
your screen is not sharing.
Oh, is it not? Let me try stop this. Is anyone else can other people see the screen share or not? Sorry.
Yes, I can see the screen share.
No problem, guys.
I can see the 2 of you.
No problem, yeah.
Okay.
I can see the screen share. It's Cian's screen we're looking at, yeah.
I can see Cian and Will.
Not a bad side either.
Yeah. Okay, well, so some people can see the screen, I think. So I'm not sure. We'll crack on anyway. So the 12 meters anyway were you know, a massive part of the cup, and it went the whole way through to basically one of the most famous like moments of the cup was when the New York Yacht Club and the Americans lost the cup for the first time ever. So that happened in
1983.
1980s or something.
1983.
So exactly, yeah. So that was when the when the Australians won it, and that was massive. You know, obviously, the New York Yacht Club, I think it was the longest winning streak in international sport that held and had this America's Cup for so long, and then finally they took it across, and the Australians won it. There's a great movie. Wind, if anyone hasn't seen it, it's a great movie about the Australians coming in and winning the cup away from the
and that was Grant Zimmer at the time, wasn't it?
I think it was, yeah. Does anyone remember that? Was it Grant Zimmer on that team?
He was on that team, yes.
Grant Zimmer was the navigator on Australia 2 in '83.
That is right.
Okay.
It was John Bertrand was the skipper.
True boss and grinder.
Okay.
Now we've got Grant Zimmer back in the America's Cup, leading the charge for Ineos as CEO. So it all comes around in circles that way.
Yeah. So after that, then I guess you will get into what you might call kind of the semi-America's, modern day America's Cup, which is when we moved into the IACC boats, and that was basically a rule that developed over time. Now, I think the ICCs were a great, addition to the Cup because they were used over so long. Basically, the technology developed over time, and the boats really got kind of better and better year on year. And this was great. It was back in the days where there was 20 or 25 people per boat, and there's a lot of opportunities for, kind of younger sailors and stuff, I think, to get involved back then. From our interpretation, there is now. So it was great to kind of see that develop, and that went all the way up until 2007, I think it was. And the last one of those cups was in Valencia, and that was the one that Elingi won, and that was the first time that the cup came to Europe, which was an interesting one. So this is, again, if you guys can see the screen, then this is the IACC still. This is obviously the Kiwis Black Magic, I think it was, on the bottom. I'm not sure who the top team is.
There's always been some great footage of those racing. I know I was every now and then go back.
Young America.
Yeah.
Oh, Young America.
Yeah.
So here's
was it the IACC that sank during one of the races? Was that class?
Yeah, that was the Australian boat, I think it was. And I think
Australia
as far as, I don't know if anyone, yeah, exactly. Yeah, Australia too. And I think from what I heard, that was due to one of the runner winches, I think, broke, and they led the runner forward to a main sheet winch or something. And I think as a result of that, the boat wasn't built to sustain those pressures, and I think it just folded the boat in two. Well, it was what I heard. So it also goes to show that the design of these boats can be slightly temperamental compared to the 109s or the A35s. We're all racing in Dublin Bay. So that was the IACC yachts. Then this is them again. You can see they're quite big crews. Now, this was a really interesting one. This is what I would consider being, I guess, the birth of the modern day America's Cup. So this was what they called the dog match, which is the deed of gift. So it was Elingi was defending the cup, and there was no challenger series for this one. But Oracle, which was headed by Larry Ellison, came through and decided to challenge for the cup and came out with this radical design. Basically, they agreed that it would be in multi-hulls, but it's obviously the defender gets to put the rules together, and it's all about how you interpret it. So you can see there's some pretty radical differences in the boats, and this is where the birth of the wing sail came. Well, it actually wasn't the birth of the wing sail. Does anyone know actually when was the first wing sail in the America's Cup? So it was actually in, look here,
1988.
Yes, and do you know which cup that was, or which boat had it?
So that was the first deed of gift match in, I think it was San Fran. It was straight after the Americans won back from the Australians in '87, and then the Kiwis did another deed of gift challenge. They didn't really want to. They wanted to do a whole challenger selection series, but Dennis Conner got a little bit cheeky and just came up with like 4 people on the catamaran and sailed rings around this big New Zealand boat. Very interesting videos on YouTube about it as well.
Yeah, exactly. So this was actually the first ever wing sail boat that was in the cup, as Vinny was saying there. And you can see that the stark differences, and this is a good kind of, I guess, indication of what happens in the cup sometimes, is that because it's not a one design rule, or there's no, it's not as strict. It's all about the interpretation of the rule. Literally, you can have 2 completely different yachts racing against each other. So that's kind of quite an interesting one to see. And these days I think the designers are a lot more wary of the rules. So when it comes to kind of parameters that they give the teams, there's probably less opportunity for stark differences like this. But look, it shows a good bit of history in the cup. And this was, I think it was Dennis Conner who skippered that small cat that won that cup, which was interesting because he was obviously so famous in the 12 meters as well. He kept going through to kind of, I guess, the modern day America's Cup. So then we got through to these. These were. Pardon?
I think the deed of gift match is when the challenger of record can't agree with the defender, and it to a kind of a legal process, and then they go back to the deed of gift, which is the rule that says that the boats shall be just less than 100 feet long or whatever it is, and they can be anything. And that's what happened then. Also what happened in 2010 after the 2007 match, which was the last of the IACCs. Then they had this deed of gift thing between the 117-foot or 115-foot trimaran and the catamaran.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and actually, interestingly as well, the 2007 final, the Team New Zealand was Dean Barker and Terry Hutchinson was the helm and tactician in that match, who were then American Magic in this one.
Yeah, who then we're going up against each other.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you know, lost out now in the last one. They got fairly done after their capsize, but yeah, it's interesting. A lot of the guys who get into the cup are really around for a long time, you know.
Yeah, it shows you really is the world's best that are in this tight knit group and continue on. And I suppose it was at this stage that we then got into this modern cup, or the modern day cup, that we all recognize, or these boats, I suppose, that we recognize, these foiling boats that still alien to so many. Definitely we're starting to see them a little bit around Dublin Bay with our Motts and stuff like that, the Wasps, but who knows where yachting will go down the line. But it was was it 2017? What? No, 2013. That was San Fran, wasn't it?
I think it was.
Yeah. So,
2013,
and those are in the AC75s. Now that
AC72s.
AC72, sorry.
Yeah.
Now that cup in itself wasn't the most. Oh, sorry, I can take it back. It was very exciting. The build-up mightn't have been the best. It was kind of a foregone conclusion that Team New Zealand would be challenging for the cup. It was by any means probably the best turnaround in any sporting event we've ever seen.
Yeah.
Where we had Oracle Team USA come back from what was it?
I think they were 8-0 down, and they came back and won 9 races in a row to win the cup. Yeah.
It was that famous interview with Jimmy Stissel.
Yeah.
Never count us out, or whatever he said. That was quite incredible.
Yeah.
Ben Ainsley hopped on board as well, I think, around the time of the turnaround.
I mean, like that cup was a really interesting one, because you know these boats were actually not initially designed to fly. And there was a lot of this kind of covert testing by the Kiwis up in lakes, so away from the ocean, so people wouldn't see it, and they were towing boats behind ribs with testing foils. And then one day they came out and they had this flying boat, and it was incredible. And I think a lot of times they think, oh look, did we show this to the world too soon, so the other teams got a chance to put foils in their boats too? But you know, it was the Kiwis who kind of developed the whole foiling idea and put it on these boats, and then they were the pioneers of it the whole way through to this America's Cup. And like the issue was then halfway through I'm not sure, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think it's still a little bit of a mystery that, you know, halfway through this cup, suddenly they changed. They got, I think John Kostecki was kicked off as tactician from Oracle, and they brought on Ainsley. And so that was one change, but then something else changed within the Oracle camp, and suddenly the boat was way faster upwinds. I think they were going like lower modes faster. They could float, and then they basically the Kiwis didn't know what hit them. You know?
Well, the reason for that is that Oracle had limited money, and also had a whole number of carbon blanks for the foils. And as a consequence of all the research that was going on and all the figures they were getting, they were able to continually improve the foils, whereas the Kiwis had actually run out of money.
Okay.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
And you know that's an incredible, like, you know, like I think thing that people forget, or sorry, not that forget, but I forgot to mention was that, you know, the cup at the end of the day, a lot of the time is all about which team is better funded. A lot of the time, unfortunately, you know, like it's a money race, and if you look at them, you know,
that's a true story, because that came back via Hissing Sid from Ben Ainsley, because Ben and Sid, because at the time Sid was his coach for the Finn, and so Ben was always talking to Sid, and he was telling them about what they were up to.
Okay. Oh wow, okay. So yeah, it really goes to show that kind of money speaks in the America's Cup. You know, if you have enough money to, you know, invest in R&D and all that kind of stuff, you know, it really makes a difference. And you know, like they try and curb that a little bit in modern day cups, like in Byrne Cup. You know, it's one design foil arms, one design rigs, stuff like that. They try and curb the cost to make it more accessible, but unfortunately, it's still not. You know, as you can see, there's only 3 challengers in this America's Cup. So, you know, the money really does speak in the cup. So this is the Kiwi boat there. You can see it's pretty impressive. I think one thing that we all underestimate when we're watching these things on TV and on YouTube is how big these things are. You know, that's 72 foot long, that thing, and it's flying above the water. You know, bear in mind the biggest boat in Dublin Bay is 45 feet, or maybe 50. You know, they're incredible machines to just skip above the water like that. So yeah,
this is the famous one. This is the training, or
they were out training.
Yeah. So our training in San Fran, and it capsized, and they lost months of prep and R&D and development from it. And where was it? The boat was found past the Golden Gate Bridge, halfway out to sea, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, the boat capsized, went under, and the rig just basically disintegrated. So they overnight, like pretty much the whole way through to the middle of the night and into the morning, they towed the boat back in. But you know, San Fran is a pretty formidable climate and sea state out there, so it was pretty dangerous for them, and the boat really got wrecked. But I think up until a couple of weeks later, people were still finding like scatters of carbon fiber, like, you know, wing sail washed up on beaches and, you know, all around the bay. So it goes to show, you know, this is unfortunately was the Cup as well. That very sadly, you know, the Artemis boat capsized and we lost Bart Simpson. You know,
tragically.
So like, you know, it's also an interesting thing of like, you know, the development of the Cup. You know, there was a lot of talk about, you know, were the boats safe? Did they push the limits too hard? But, you know, things can go pretty wrong in the Cup, even as we saw, you know, the other week with the Americans capsizing in the current 36th America's Cup. You know, they really want to push and win, so things can go pretty badly, and you end up with a boat that looks like this.
Yeah. Absolutely. Here's some more shots. This is then the next America's Cup. So obviously, we all know the story. Oracle defended a title in San Fran, got to host it again. Emirates Team New Zealand were challenger of records, so they were there with the design. And this one moved from San Fran, and they decided to host it in Bermuda at the time. So there's a few more kind of competitors at the time. We had the Japanese there, the French were there. Who else? Were the Swedish there again?
Yeah, the Swedes were there. Yeah.
So this one, so this one was a lot closer. So we had a very exciting challenger series. It ended up with the Team New Zealand facing here Ainsley in their semi-final match for the Louis Vuitton Cup, and on the other side you had Artemis against the Japs, I believe it was, on their one. So unfortunately France didn't make it through to the Louis Vuitton, the knockout stages for this. But we saw got to the final stage where we saw the New Zealand face off against Artemis, and it was 5-2, I think, that the final was for that for the Louis Vuitton Cup, before we got to see them face off against the Americans again in the actual America's Cup. And this one, without a doubt, was a lot more exciting. We saw the boats rock up with again, the design was a little bit similar, but we had the famous cyclists knocking around on the Kiwi boats, which I think took everyone by surprise. And by the end of the Cup, we saw Tom Slingsby on the back of a bike, trying to do a bit of tactician. And you hear stories coming out of that Cup of just the power that was needed to control the foils, because everything was being pushed through the hydraulic system. So unlike this America's Cup where you have batteries powering everything below deck, it was indeed these generations of the boat that all the power from the boat had to come from the grinders themselves. So you hear stories of Glenn Ashby, who's now the tactician on Ineos. Not Glenn Ashby, sorry. Who's the tactician? His name skips me. Giles Scott, sorry. And he was saying, look, I could be a tactician all day long, but we didn't nearly have enough power to get the boat around the race course. So he was there constantly grinding away, and tactics was kind of thrown out the side of the window for them. And so again, back to this, just the pure power that was needed to control these boats. And Emirates Team New Zealand showed that they could harness it better than everyone else, and kind of walked away with the Cup when it got to the final series.
Yeah, and this was also like where I think foil design really kind of started getting to its stride in this Cup. You know, it was still fairly primitive in the 72s in San Fran. So when it got here, the boats are really starting to develop and get a lot, you know, more advanced. And you even see, you know, I think, like Ian said, I think personally this is one of the most exciting kind of foiling America's Cups, because there was a good amount of teams, there was lots of racing, they had a World Series in the lead up to it all. You know, it was really entertaining. And then even these boats are still around today. It was these boats that were then purpose as what we know today as Sail GP. So basically, you know, it's interesting that they've had a second life, which is very rare, you know, in the America's Cup. That, you know, like the boats are usually scrapped. Like the dog match that was in Valencia, the Oracle Trimaran is currently sitting on a lake at Oracle HQ, and the Alinghi one is abandoned in a yard in Valencia. So it was good to see these boats get a second life as Sail GP boats, and they're now one design. They basically took the best elements from each team in this cup and brought it forward, and yeah, they're still being raced today.
Yeah, here's another shot just of, it was Nathan Outridge helming that one at the time, and we all get to enjoy as a commentator this time around.
Yeah. So yeah. So then we get into off the screen. Yeah. Then we get into the current cup. You know what we know today as the 36th America's Cup, which is in the AC 75s, which was, you know, a big thing for the Kiwis. Well, actually not so necessarily for the Kiwis, but for the Italians, because they were the challenger of records, and I think they funded an initial part of the Kiwi campaign or the design process. Basically, they were like, look, we want it to be back in monohulls, and I guess what they agreed on in the end was, look, let's go for a foily monohull. So they came up with this mad design, which you can see. This was the initial renders, and I think when it all came out, we were a little bit shocked. We didn't really know what was going on. You know, these massive things sticking out the sides, you know, thinking they could take someone's head off during attack, or you know, these foils were like incredible design, like way beyond their, you know, their years. So then we ended up with this, which is where we are today. So we have the AC-72s, which are these monohull flying yachts. You know, it's been an incredible, I guess, development that you know, you never thought you could have a foiling yacht, because it was all going, or a foiling monohull, apart from, you know, the likes of the Moth and what we know today.
Yeah. The results from the initial render, what we've seen today, are just incredible. And we all know the costs that have been incurred by the several teams, like the backers themselves. Like they knew what they're getting into. So we have the backers behind this team. We have Ineos being backed by the wealthiest man in the UK. Emirates New Zealand, obviously their funding is well known. American Magic, with the New York Yacht Club, with 3 billionaires supporting them. And then Luna Rossa, they've been around for a long while as well, but they all knew the costs that were very much that were necessary to be able to get this campaign up and running. And I think we've heard stats of that $500 million was thrown into the combined campaigns at a minimum. So these boats, they truly are spectacular. Like there's no keel. All of a sudden we see these boats flying around without a keel. They're 75 foot long. The masts are 87 foot above deck. Like it's something else, all right.
Yeah, they're incredible, and it was good as well. You know, there was a little bit of development on the main sails. Like these main sails are still wing sails, but they're actually soft sails. Like, so they're made of similar material. And we'll ask profs, you know, take on this a little in a little bit. But you know, like these sails are made of, I think, essentially the basics of what, you know, you could have your J09 sails made of. But they're just twin skins, and they have, you know, I'll let Prof get into that a little bit later on. But yeah, so this is it. You can see here that the foils that we were talking about, you know, they're incredible looking boats. And like a big thing, kind of to go back on what Cian said, which is that, you know, there's been so much money thrown in, and they're such extreme looking boats. Something that you see in the first round of an America's Cup, where there's a new design, is that there's such a massive disparity of design, and like everything looks so different, because basically everyone's trying to figure out what's going on. You know, they've been handed this like, you know, couple 100-page document that outlines the design rule, and they basically said, look, interpret this and see what you think. And then as the series goes on, as more iterations of this design happen, basically people figure out what works and what doesn't, so that basically the kind of the boats fall more in line with a more common design, which is what you saw really in the IACC boats over time in 2007. You know, a lot of the boats looked relatively similar. There was a very common design characteristics, and you have to kind of look a lot finer details to find the difference between what was fast and what wasn't in the boats.
Yeah, so it kind of kicked off, and from the first boats that were launched, we could see quite clearly what teams, what each team was thinking. So we had Ineos and American Magic launched quite a similar boat, both kind of with that scow-like hulls, those rounded shapes, while we had Emirates Team New Zealand and Luna Rossa, who were obviously involved with making the rules. They had that, was it the bustle, as it's called, which you can see here in the second bit, the second launch of Ineos's boat. So this is their first one on the left. So they would have, all the teams would have messed around on mini versions of their boats after seeing the renderings and the rulings, and then launched their first boat for the first attempt and gone, okay, this is where we're going. And then once they've launched them, they're straight away thinking about their second one. So Ineos, as I said, and American Magic launched these flat-shaped ones, and at the same time, we had Emirates New Zealand and Luna Rossa launching one with these bustles. Now, they weren't as sharp as what we see on this final Ineos one, but again, the nature of this design is seen very much shift towards this bustle shape, which allows the boats to fall also kind of into displacement mode, which we all seen in the Christmas Cup. If you're very much in displacement mode, you've lost the race. But it was quite an important bit, because at the time no one knew as well, when these second boats are being designed, of will they have to race some of the race in the displacement mode. They were all thinking, sure, okay, ideal situation is you're foiling the whole way around, but could there be scenarios where you're in a displacement mode? So that bustle comes into it then at that point. And I'm not going to try get into the engineering bit, so if anyone has any wise bits that they want to throw in, or information around the engineering, we'd love to hear it as well.
Yeah, I think, like, also another thing that you got to remember is that because these boats are flying through the air, you know, these days is as much aerodynamics as it is hydrodynamics, you know, whereas in the old monohull days, you could have done tank testing and, you know, all this like, you know, very simple testing methods. Like these days, you literally have the likes of the Americans partnering with Airbus, you know, the leading aircraft manufacturer, to help design their boats, because it's not just about, you know, they spend the majority, like I think the majority of races they're foiling 100% of the time.
Yeah,
you know.
Absolutely.
So therefore, you have kind of the hydrodynamics is all based around the foil design and shape and control systems, and then the shape of the hull, you know, is really aerodynamics. It's all about, you know, what's efficient through the air. You know, what happens if the boat touches down? How can there be, like, how to stop the hull from sticking into the water, and so that they can get back up onto the foils as soon as possible. So it's interesting to see the likes of, you know, these aero companies getting in and assisting with the design.
Yeah, and Ineos partnering with Mercedes, aren't they, on the Formula One side of things?
Yeah,
so,
massively.
Yeah, like the help, the expertise coming from other industries into this yachting races.
Yeah, it was
second to none.
It was interesting. You saw after the Christmas Cup, which was like just obviously end of last year, you know, the Brits were having real issues with their boat and how they were going. You know, they were really spat at the back, and there was talk at the time, look, are they sandbagging? You know, this doesn't matter. It's not part of the America's Cup, all this kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, you know, like I at the time, I was very much so the opinion that they were. You know, it was all a mind game. I think the general consensus was that they just weren't on the pace. But you saw a lot of the credit they gave when they started winning again in the Louis Vuitton Cup. They, you know, Ainsley a couple of times said, like, look, thank you to Mercedes, you know, Mercedes F1 team, like, because they have a shared owner, you know, Jim Ratcliffe owns a stake in the F1 team as well. You know, the fact that you have F1 teams inputting to sailing and helping them come back and start winning races is incredible, you know. So, you know, he unfortunately was asked what changes they helped make, and he was very secretive, as everyone is in the Cup. They don't want to give away their advantage. But look, it was interesting that, you know, there's such crossover these days.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is kind of leads into our sail design of Prof. We'd love to get your insight into it, because as we said, we've moved away from the hard foil or the hard wing sails back to sail, the soft sail that we all know that we see out in Dublin Bay. Now, obviously, it's not the same kind of soft sail, but Prof, again, correct me if I'm wrong, it's pretty much two sails that are kind of glued together in some form of in that shape that is allowing to create this power that is allowing to lift these 75-foot boats up above the water.
Yeah, that's right.
And
they call it the twin skinned sail, and essentially it's two main sails, which are both hoisted up the back of the mast, and the mast is a D section, so, you know, the front of it is curved and the back of it is, broadly speaking, flat. But what's interesting is that the mast itself is rotating. So you have the leeward mainsail, or the leeward skin, and the windward mainsail, and there are separate control systems for controlling both these sails, because the leeward one has to be deeper than the windward one in order to create an aerofoil like an airplane wing. So the mainsails are very, very sophisticated because they also have 3 zones that are controlled by the class rule. And there's a 1.5 meter zone in the bottom of the sails and a 4 meter zone in the top of them. And those zones have got separate control systems. So you'll see that the mainsail trimmer has the control of all these different systems on a little Xbox like handheld controller. So it's a very, very sophisticated mainsail setup, if you like. And they moved to this really because the wing sails that we had for the prior 2 cups, while they were technologically, you know, very advanced, they were an absolute nightmare to manage because it took 20 or 30 people to get the wings onto the boats and off the boats every day. And also, like, you can't really depower a wing, you know. Literally, once it was put into the boat, you had to have somebody on standby all the time. And I think the other reason is that they really wanted something. The America's Cup has always been about trickle down. The trickle down effect from the America's Cup has ultimately percolated down to us day-to-day mortals. And it was felt that the wing sails were never going to really percolate down, but that's why they went back to soft sails, if you like. So the twin skin mainsail was a real, if you like, cutting edge type of soft sail for the mainsail. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think, Prof, it's interesting as well. Like, you know, a big element of the cup is a lot of the time it's being trickle down. You know, and that concept of trickle down is what is developed in the cup is relevant to what we do day to day. You know, in our own boats. And I think, you know, I can't remember really, like, I've only really watched it in replays, but the IACC yachts were a lot closer, obviously, in displacement monohulls to what we sail today. So the technology really trickled down from those boats to what we sail in Dublin Bay.
Yeah.
But like, did you see a lot more direct trickle down back then compared to now? Because even though like, I know these mainsails, they have Cunninghams, they have main sheets, all that kind of stuff, but
yeah, like if you think, like, North Sails have been involved in the America's Cup, winning America's Cup boats since 1980, and if you even go back to then, all the sail making technological advances have come from the America's Cup. So in 1980, we had the very first leech cut, which are the forerunner of radial sails on the head sails in Australia 1. And then in Australia 2, you know, we had full aramid Kevlar tri-radial sails. And then when we went to the IACC boats in 1992 in San Diego, we had the very first Cuban fiber sails, which were designed by a physicist called Heino Meldner, and they were on America Cubed. And Cuban fiber then became sort of mainstream in the Grand Prix area. And then, you know, then we went to fathead mainsails and fully battened mainsails, and ultimately Illingi first tested the 3DI concept in 2007 on some test sails in Valencia. Now, they didn't use them in the finals, but North Sails then bought the 3DI technology from some Swiss engineers, and that's the 3DI technology that you see every day in Dublin Bay, but it's still the same base technology that's used for these twin skin mainsails and the head sails that we're seeing now. You know what I mean? So and even you know, the spars are, you know, we now call it the engine above the deck. So like, it's not good enough to just design sails anymore. You have to design the complete aero package, which means the rig, the rigging, the sails, and now the actual hull itself is a hydro stroke aero package because they're so closely linked, you know what I mean? But all that stuff ultimately comes down to us. But some of that stuff that's being used right now is still a way away from our rating rules here actually learning how to deal with it, because our rating rules are too simplistic. Like IRC is too simplistic a rule to try and rate some of this technology right now, you know what I mean? So it needs to move on.
So like on that kind of, you know, we have a
correct
question.
on that, because I know that the IRC office in Lymington, I mean, there was a statement earlier on this year that they are starting to work to try and get a process whereby they can actually rate foils.
Yeah, I mean, I think IRC are, you know, they're slowly moving, trying to move, I think, from favorably looking at heavy slow boats, which is typically what an IRC rule likes, to trying to be more nuanced in how they rate lighter displacement, bow up, planing keel boats, and then even, you know, how they'll try and move on to rate a foiling boat. It's a very difficult one for RC because it's a single point rating system, whereas ORC, as we know, is a much more sophisticated rule. So I have no idea how IRC are going to go about that. That'll be a challenge.
No one knows, but they're trying.
Yeah, you know, IRC is a very successful rule, and it rates cruiser racers, for want of a better word, really well, and it copes with a lot of different boats from the 60s up to now, but it doesn't seem to be able to cope very well with the boats that have been coming through in the last 5 to 10 years, you know. But that's another topic, lads.
Yeah.
Prof, just it would be interesting to get your take on this. Lorcan Balfe has asked, you know, what elements of the cup do you see, of this cup, do you see trickling down to the ordinary class of racing? And the reason I ask you is because, like, personally, like, you know, foils I don't think are going to enter the mainstream, I guess, to Dublin Bay sailing like as soon as we just because of the physical demands of the boat, but the sail design and sail technology might. You know, have you heard of anything, or is it still super top secret? Or
well, it's interesting, like because North Sails are on Ineos and on Luna Rossa Prada Pirelli and on New Zealand, and we have separate designers embedded in the three groups. I suppose, like, the first thing is that the sails are unbelievably light. Like a 3DI sail, the 3DI sails that are being used on these boats are very, very, very high spec, all carbon, no film sails, and like zero durability. Like, we would never sell them here because they would just not last, you know what I mean? So I think as we learn more about how to work with these materials and then develop techniques to make them more durable, then it trickles down. But right now, you know, that if you see the sails are absolutely flat to the deck. You know, you can see that there's the main sails and the head sails are glued to the deck, because in aero design, when a foil comes down to a perpendicular surface, that's the most efficient way, and you don't have any tip vortices. So I don't know how we're going to get from, you know, sails that touch the deck totally, like these America's Cup boats, compared to the boats that we all sail, which they end up in booms, you know what I mean? So there's a little bit of gap there. We already know about fathead mainsails. You know, the headboard, generally speaking, on a fathead main, it's very stylish, mini fathead mains right now, but actually aerodynamically, they don't make any sense unless the fathead is about 20% of the length of the foot or more. So you see lots of sails going around the place with little mini fatheads, and it's just style. So I think the RC rule is certainly starting to less penalize fathead sails. They used to kill the 7/8 girth up high, but now they're starting to decrease the importance of that. They're also going to have to look more favorably at twin backstays, because you can't have a fathead mainsail without twin backstays, and RC typically penalized more than one backstay. So I think that as we see those sort of things in the public consciousness, our rules that we have to sail with here have to move with the times so that it can trickle down. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what's in a couple of years' time. What we do see. We've got one final question for you, Prof, on the sail design, and obviously we've seen the boats or the design of the boats not change dramatically, but advance dramatically from where we were at Christmas to where we are for the semi-finals or even pre-semi-finals. We saw Luna Rossa. It was quoting saying they gained 10% boat increase over 5 days, and we're obviously seeing the sails develop radically throughout the Cup as well. And who knows where it could go down the line if these boats use again. But one of the interesting things, we saw American Magic come out with this bat sail. Now it obviously wasn't designed by your teams, but it was this bat sail that was a lot smaller at the top, but bigger at the bottom. And the question from Tig is, what was the thinking behind this bat sail? Was it the pure friction thing, or was it again the normal sail and those wind breezes was just too powerful, or what was your take on that?
We've no idea. Like,
no idea. So we won't see a North Sails bat sail yet.
Yeah, well, it's interesting actually. I mean, it's worth chatting about. Like, so American Magic sails were not North Sails. They were Quantum sails, and Quantum sails are owned by the DeVos family, who are big Republican New York club members, and so that's the connection there. But we modelled like all that and felt that was not the way to go. You know what I mean? But I suppose it is worth just when you look at the sails on all the boats, like they're incredibly flat. Because once the boats foil, you don't need power, so you don't need depth. Like a dragon sail is super deep and always will be because it's a very heavy boat. But of course, once these boats foil, you don't need depth. You need to minimize aero drag, so they become very flat. But actually, in the Christmas Cup, there was a couple of times when they were displacement sailing, when it was super light. And if you look back at any of the shots, the extraordinary amount of camber that they were able to put into the sails was absolutely phenomenal. And they have to be able to switch to, once they generate enough power to foil, to be able to switch the sail shapes to super flat immediately, you know? It was like designing the same sail for two entirely different boats, because the characteristic of a displacement boat is utterly different from a foiling boat, and you have to have systems to be able to utterly change the shape of the sails. You know what I mean? And the sail designs and like the main sails have 6 full-length battens, and then they also have flutter battens of 1 meter long in between them. But all these battens have their own control systems. And then at the top 4 meters of the sail, nobody knows, because they won't divulge it, what the systems are for each of those sections of the sails to control them. So like all the sailing that we do, you know, main sheet, traveller, backstay, and the outhaul, that's what you have. But actually here you have the main sheet, the traveller, the running backstays. The Cunningham is a massive control, but also you have separate control systems up high. I have no idea how they work, but that's to control the twist up high. And I guess all these systems therefore manage to change, you know, utterly change the shape of those sails when the boats effectively become 2 different boats when they go from displacement to foil.
Yeah, of course.
I actually have a little video. Will, did you want me to play it?
Yeah, so I actually have it here. I'll whack it up on my screen quickly, and
yeah. It just explains It just explains the twin skin concept and the physics behind it, and actually it isn't even a new concept, guys. It was invented 92 years ago, believe it or not. So
it'd be interesting to see where the sail design goes, because it wasn't too long ago that even some, obviously we sort of boats testing with code zeros and everything, and then still thinking, oh, this might be a viable option on the race course. So it's all still in
and the thing about the code zeros is that the current cup boats have got sprits and they're never used, because they were originally intended to use their code zeros, but because, first of all, because they've managed to generate enough power and very light airs to get foiling, they don't need the code zeros now. And also just like the weight of carrying a code zero around is just not worth it, you know? So
yeah, absolutely.
now,
I think we've assigned you as the host, so you should be able to share that video on your end.
Yeah, I was having trouble pulling it up, so.
I'll try and share my screen, will I, lads?
Yeah, you should be able to now, yeah.
Okay, hold on a second here now. So now I sometimes make an error here. So I'm going to share the window that the video is open in as opposed to my screen.
Yeah, perfect.
So, I'm going to go share sound and optimize video clip here, right? So so can you see that now, lads?
Yeah, we can, yeah.
So I'm scrolling down now, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so so basically this is just a quick little video about what is the twin skin mainsail. And I'll just play it very at the start just to check the audio, okay? All right, so
Welcome to What Is.
Okay.
That works. Yeah.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Full screen, I should be good.
Let me just go hide floating meeting controls and I'll just go full screen, okay? Where are we?
Is a series where we aim to answer some of the more complex questions around the 36th edition of the America's Cup. In episode 2, we aim to answer just what is the twin skin mainsail. We've turned to our North Sails experts to fill us in. Watch and find out. In the last episode, we explained 2 key things. What is foiling, and how the America's Cup has always led the way in sailing innovation. This edition of the Cup is where the story of the twin-skinned mainsail begins. Here's a fun fact about the twin-skinned mainsail. It was actually invented over 90 years ago, in 1927, by Louis Francis Herreshoff, the son of Nathaniel Herreshoff, the famous naval architect who built 5 winning America's Cup boats back in the 19th century. So, how did a sail, invented in 1927, become a central part of the America's Cup in 2021? Following the Kiwis' win in 2017, the boat and sail designers sat around a table and began drafting the Cup's new rules. There was a desire to move away from the solid wings of the last 3 America's Cups to make the benefits of the technology in the America's Cup more accessible to all sailors. The wings were cool, but you needed loads of people to move them, and there was no trickle-down effect from elite racing to everyday sailing. But still, what is the twin-skin mainsail? Don't overthink it, it's exactly what the name says it is. 2 mainsails. The design teams figured out that if they make a D-shaped mast, then hang a sail skin off each of the back corners, they could make a really nice, low-drag, aerodynamic surface that trimmers could manipulate. As the sails and the boats developed, the designers realised that the twin-skin mainsail is actually really versatile. For the majority of teams competing, these sails are all made out of North Sails 3DI. We know what you're thinking. There must be loads of secret squirrel, super techie, magical things going on between the sails. Well, we hate to burst your bubble, but there isn't. It's actually dead air. It is, however, up to the teams if they want to connect the sails at the leech and the top and bottom. It's also up to the teams if they want a boom and if the skins are the same size. And the rest of the rigging? Nothing secret about it. An AC-75 still has a Traveller, Cunningham, running back stays and sheet systems. When sailing, the boats are continuously adapting to what the boat needs, with varying conditions. We know it's a lot to take in, but we hope this gives you a basic understanding of what's happening with the twin-skin main and its 90-year history. Stand by for our next episode of What Is. Hit the subscribe button below and make sure to tune into all the North Sails coverage of the 36th America's Cup.
Now, stop sharing.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks for that, Prof. No, that's super interesting.
No bother, guys.
Yeah.
Very good.
Good stuff. All right. Well, yeah. Look, Prof. Thanks a mil for that input there. But can you see a button there, Prof, to give me back the hosting rights there?
I just stopped sharing screen. Did I?
Yeah, I just need to take back my host rights.
Okay, hold on a second now. Let me go to my floating. Where's my float? Where's my floating video controls?
If we can't find it, I am actually not sure where to get this back either. But look, so kind of moving on from the sales stuff, obviously the foil design. I'm also conscious we're getting close to time, guys. So we're going to quickly touch on the foils for 2 minutes, and then we're going to get on to one interesting rule situation, and then what we're going to do is we're actually going to do this again next Tuesday. So like there's an America's Cup specific one, and we'll continue and do some more breakdowns of racing and stuff. So if anyone wants to join for that, but look, for now, obviously the you've seen the photos. The foils come out each side of the boat, and there's a big difference. Cian, like the big difference between the last foils in the last cup and the foils in this cup.
Yeah, massively. Yeah, like again, so we've had super insight into what's happening above the water, but there's a whole nother aspect of the race happening below the water. So again, I don't pretend to be an engineer, so please correct me if I'm wrong, if there's any bits that I'm saying is incorrect. But obviously back in the previous two editions, the foils are very much the way the boats are foiling is how the rake of the foils are being adjusted. And so there's no flaps or anything like that. So the thought of it was similar to a wing, but it's not. You didn't have the flaps like you did this time around. So obviously this time around the rules changed slightly, and they said, hey, look, you're going to have your foils, but you're also going to have these flaps on the end of the foils that helps you control the lift of the foils, I suppose, and lifting on boats. And one of the amazing things that each of these foils weigh 900 kilos. So the two foils combined are over a third of the weight of the boat. So design and the engineering that is involved into this is a whole nother landscape. And we'd love to do another chat where we'll try to get a bit of insight from an engineer or somebody who's got a lot more knowledge about these than we do. But the development of the foils is a super interesting, obviously taken. I'm not sure what boat this was, but a lot of boats launched their first boat with two separate foils. So they're throughout the whole America's Cup process. So this cup, the boats could only use 6 foils. So a lot of them obviously you'd think would do 3 packages. So package 1 of 2 foils, which we see here, where we had a Y-shaped and a T-shaped foil. So they would have tested both and gone, okay, which one works better? Then the second iteration or the second set of foils where you're working on foil number 3 and 4, you'd like to think the teams have a pretty good idea of what they're doing. And then they're on to foil 5 and 6, which we know kind of the Brits had to whip out before the Christmas Regatta. The Team New Zealand guys were whipping out, I think, only recently they launched a new set of foils. Luna Rossa only recently launched a new set of foils. So this is a huge design aspect, but again, the rules was super limiting. So when we talk about the foil design, there was obviously rules around the design. So the box itself, I think there was a box rule of about 4 meters width that the teams could design in. Obviously, they had to be a set weight. And then because the foils don't shift or the angle of attack can't change, because again, there's areas of the rules where if the angle of attack changes by over 20%, it's now established as a brand new foil. So again, there was rumors after the Christmas Regatta where the Brits had gone, where Brits had changed the angle of attack of their foils, but no, that can't have been the case because they would have had to establish a whole new set of foils, which they didn't have any room left to do. But one of the really interesting bits was, again, in around these flap areas and the housing components for these flaps. Because you can imagine the pressures or the friction on the waters is so much different to what airplanes and stuff experience traveling through air. And so the whole housing units for these flaps has to be within this foil arm, in this foil arm area. I mean, you can imagine the forces that these are under. So again, we can go on so many different tangents. We'll probably spend another 2 hours chatting between all the different members here in this group of what these foil arms are and how we've seen them change over time. But I think, as Will said, we'll try leave this for a separate section and try come back to this maybe next week or the week after. But again, this is a whole other aspect, and hopefully from this weekend's racing, listening from the commentary with Nathan Outridge, Kenny Reid, we'll learn a little bit more about what each team is doing on that as well.
Yeah. I think what we might do now is, we were hoping to get to maybe a couple like rules things here, and we were hoping to get Gemma's input and stuff. But I think what we might do, just because we're conscious of time, I'll show a quick video, which was, I think, one of the most interesting I guess crosses or moments of the cup so far, and then basically we can leave that fresh in your mind, and next Tuesday we'll pick things up again, and we'll talk about this situation in particular, and also we'll do a rundown of the racing that's coming this weekend. So I'll just play this. So here the volume isn't working, but see us here. You know, this was a big cross. Obviously, in that situation, the Italians would have had right away. It's a downwind port starboard. You know, it's a very interesting one. Don't know if anyone saw it, but look, it just goes to show how close this racing gets. If it were me, I would have thought maybe, you know, it was a bit close to call, maybe in a penalty against the Brits in that one, but the Brits got away with it and didn't get penalised. But look, that's how close it gets, and you'll see more of it this weekend, and then hopefully next Tuesday when we dive into this again, we'll have a rundown, and we can have more of an insight into these specific rules cases and see where we go from there.
Yeah, no doubt there'll be more of those instances this weekend, I think, with Luna Rossa and Ineos facing off.
Exactly. When's the first day's racing?
It's Friday morning. Friday, we're very early morning for our time. So
Yeah.
I think there's a repeat happening at some point, but obviously they're all streamed on YouTube, which is a great thing. So
who's gonna be up watching it live, guys?
I don't think I'll be watching
I'll
it
be
live.
fast asleep.
Yeah, not on a school night.
Listen, lads, call yourselves America's Cup aficionados. Get on it.
So look, if anyone's interested, I just in the chat there I put a quick link to a WhatsApp group. It's just we just thought we'd get it going. It's a WhatsApp group just for the America's Cup, and if anyone wants to join it and put in insights, link videos, anything you have that you think is interesting, you can put stuff in there, and you know, it'll be a good kind of forum to chat about the cup. You know, just if anyone's interested in that. I'm not sure if anyone's as much of a nerd about this kind of stuff as myself or Cian, but
no, absolutely. I think we've all missed the yacht club bar chats where a lot of these discussions would have happened. So hopefully this forum has allowed that, and hopefully this WhatsApp group will allow it as well. And we can touch base, as Will said, next Tuesday, where after another exciting weekend's racing, and maybe touch on a few more aspects, try get someone with a little bit more insight into the foils than me and myself.
Yeah,
than me or Will.
Yeah, we don't really know what we're talking about. We managed to spoof away for an hour. But look, we hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you everyone for joining. We really appreciate it, this new format. So
well done, Cian. Well done, Will, and Prof. Thank you so much for your insight. Well done.
Well done. Very good.
Thanks very much.
Everyone, chat soon, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Nobody's going to stay for a bit of banter now.
we will. We will. If anyone's hanging around.
Yeah, if anyone wants to hang around.
Half the crack is staying for the banter afterwards.
Does anybody know about the yellow card for Ineos? What it's all about?
Yeah, so that was an interesting one. So it was a compliance rule. Obviously, it was a compliance rule.
I have that if you want.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Will you let me share the screen? And
yes, I will do that for you here.
I'm all over that one.
There we go.
There you go.
Yeah, gentlemen, sorry,
No.
We were hoping to call you.
I understand.
A little bit more, so we'll have to do that next week.
Yeah,
you should be able to.
So this is the picture that Luna Rossa submitted. Can you see my screen? Sorry. Yeah. Can you see that? So there's a bar or a cable that goes from the foot of the mast and the Cunningham system inside the sail, right?
Mm-hmm.
Luna Rossa files in a non-compliance report, as they have to do, alleging that they are breaking rule 18.1, which says there shall be no intentional openings through sail skins. Yeah. So this then goes to the measurement committee, and the measurement committee issues a report. By the way, all of this is public. It's on the web, and they make a determination together with the race director, with the regatta director, that it breaches the rule, and that it makes it does not affect performance. and they have written in the rules this one, which is similar to what happens in measurement protests in normal fleet racing. If the first one doesn't affect performance, you will get a warning. So this one, if the report states that the breach of the class has not or could not have reasonably been expected to have improved the performance of the yacht, or has not or could have significant effect on the outcome of the race, the first offense is $5,000. The second or subsequent offense is just the disqualification. So the jury just applied that to the letter and said, well, we got these reports from the rules committee and the measurement committee that say exactly that. They are breaching the rule, but it has no effect on the performance and the outcome of the race. And therefore, we're just fining them with $5,000. Now, the interesting question is, what happens next? Because it's not clear in the way it is written whether it is always has to be the same rule, the same class offense, or any subsequent class offense. If you know what I mean, the one that we are talking about.
Yeah.
I think the normal ruling on this will be that it'll be any class offense at the moment.
Okay.
Now, I haven't been able to go through all these documents in detail.
That seems to be the what's Ben Ainsley and the talk.
But the talk is, oops, we cannot sleep up here anymore.
And they're expecting more. They're very much expecting Luna Rossa to play dirty, however you want to say it. But that's at the heart of America's Cup as well.
I'm sure if Ineos loses the first race, they'll be playing dirty as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Don't worry.
So, Gemma,
there's also.
Oh, sorry, guys, go on.
So I go ahead, Prof. Now it's good. You go first.
No, I was just going to ask you, Gemma, if there is a subsequent offence, is it possible? And let's say it's Ineos. Like, is it possible that they could start the final series at -1, like Oracle did that time?
Well, so this is interesting. Probably the way that the events have been wrapped together, it could go to the final with the minus, or with a negative one. If that's
the Prada Cup final.
Yeah. But it certainly wouldn't. I don't think the way it's written, it'll go to the challenge with the minus.
Do you know? Also, I think there's an element as well that maybe they're a bit harsh, saying is like that at the end of the day, like the measurers looked at the boat and they signed off on it. They're like, yeah, this is compliant. Yeah. Off you go racing. You don't think there's an element of them being a bit harsh, saying as the measures.
They have a somewhat complicated structure around all of these. They have first the arbitration panel, then they have the rules. The rules committee, which makes the interpretations on all of these, on the rule itself. Then they have the measures, which check for compliance. But as you've seen, first they agree after having given the boat as the rubber stamp, then they are saying at the same time it's breaking the rules. So how many times are being checked? I would imagine they are well on top of the boats all the time.
They also said that that more measures have been freed up now that American Magic isn't there. So obviously the heat turned pretty hard on the measurers.
Mm-hmm.
But it's often hard to anticipate these things until the competitors get at them, and then they really focus on it almost in a way that you'd have to be a competitor to do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. Sure. No, I'm sure it won't. It's definitely. I'm sure it won't be the end of what we hear around this area.
No.
There's also talk around the, and again, it's super technical, and I've no insight into it. But the design of the flaps on Team New Zealand, I've heard rumors that because all the other boats have 2 flaps, while Emirates New Zealand have 1 continuous one, and whether the rules are written correct, whether the rules allow for that continuous flap instead of the 2 separate ones, so. It's all very super interesting.
Yeah. I remember what they have. The foil flap.
Yeah, it was something about the flaps are down to the control, I think. And it's like, as long as the control is coming from the foil arm itself, then you're allowed to connect the flaps or something, versus having individual controls for each flap on the end of the foil. But that was a good. With your man Mozzie Sales.
Mozzie Sales, he does.
Yeah, the Mozzie Sales video on that was very good. So I'll put that into the WhatsApp group if anyone hasn't seen it. He really dives into it.
Yeah, 2 foil flaps, each of which must be a linear component.
Yeah.
So who do we think is going to win on Friday?
I'd say the English have probably got us.
Yeah, you'd like to back.
You'd like to. I quite like to back the English. Just I think they come from behind after the Christmas Cup has been nice to see that continue. But you never know. Like those couple of days in the water where the Italians were racing the Americans, even though it wasn't necessarily very close, it's still one-on-one racing, and it gives them a massive boost.
Yeah, there's obviously both boats developed so much in the last while. Like the Brits did massive after the Christmas Cup. And Luna Rossa recently. It won't be the end of it.
The other thing that sorry lads. I was just about to say is the other sideshow that's starting to bubble along is if New Zealand retain it, they have stated that they're not going to defend it in New Zealand. And they've actually put it out to tender on a number of cities around the world, including some very close to home, as to who would like to pay for the privilege of hosting the next America's Cup.
Which is the closest to home that you've heard, Prof?
I couldn't possibly say.
I heard it was.
I heard it was going to be Holt.
but very close to home. Very, very close.
But Royal Cork is having meetings about it as well, apparently.
Wow. But because let's say the Kiwis win, it's still the Royal New Zealand Yacht Squadron who have the cup, and Emirates New Zealand just race on behalf of them. So the Royal Yacht Squadron are happy to host it on the other side of the world. Obviously, the value of the cup.
Well, I think. I mean, obviously, if the Brits win it, well, then they are the defender.
Yeah, of course.
But if New Zealand win it, the Brits, it's already been set up that the Brits are the challenger of record.
Exactly. Yeah,
and they will be. Yeah. They will work together to design the rules for the next cup. But various governments have been approached, and the Irish government is one of them, has been approached.
Wow.
They're interested.
Which is also interesting. I think it's great to see that the Ineos guys are going to continue to back the Brits. To have that continuity. You would also assume that the Americans would hopefully be back. Hopefully with the next cup, and also if they keep it in the 72s. There was word that the existing yachts for this cup will be sold to lower funded teams. So if you got to a stage where we have 20 teams, or sorry, not 20, but maybe 10 teams in the next cup, it will be incredible. Because I know in the IACCs they did that. A couple of the boats, I think the China team maybe was one of their boats was a second team from someone else, like a second boat from someone else. So if there's that trickle down of boats within the cup, it would be great.
It's interesting to know that there were actually been over 100 IAAC boats were built in the end.
And I think that was a golden era. Valencia was an unbelievable spectacle. Because there were so many teams and so many boats. It was the two golden eras were Valencia in 07 and Perth in 87, where you just had a massive number of teams, and it was an extraordinary showcase. So I think
actually was producing television. It was watched around the world.
Yeah.
Hosting in somewhere else wouldn't be that much different to Bermuda, though, would it?
Say again?
Like New Zealand hosting somewhere else wouldn't be that much different to the US hosting in Bermuda.
No, it wouldn't. But I think the interesting one was after, I think, the Golden Gate Yacht Club. Obviously they were given the option to bid to rehost that cup. They put it to the city to the city of San Fran to rehost the next cup. I think San Fran were almost like, look, it was not financially viable for us. It's not going to work out. So we don't mind if you shop around. Whereas I think the Kiwis are probably a lot more proud of their America's Cup heritage. So you'd be interested to see if they'd be as willing to give up that hosting, the hosting ability to another country.
Yeah. I think they're looking for.
There's an argument here is that financially, there is no way the Kiwis have done very well out of this cup. It's probably cost the government a great deal of money.
That's right. 100%. And there's a lot of, there's a significant, obviously sailing is huge in New Zealand, but there is plenty of opposition as to how much government money it's costing in New Zealand. So, but they talk.
Well, I think Ireland's GDP is twice New Zealand's, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's interesting. Like I believe that the figure that they're looking for is about $40 or $45 million to host it. No, let me get this straight. No, it's
you got a library in Dunleary for that.
Yeah, but if you think, but the Irish government put up €40 million to host the Ryder Cup, and that was one weekend, arguably. You could put a case together that this is 3 years of, potential, economic activity. I'm sure there are benefits that, you could put a case together for a government to host it. You know what I mean? The other thing is the TV stuff really doesn't work on the other side of the world for New Zealand. So I think that's why a European venue just worked so well. You know what I mean? So that'd be good. Question is whether it be Cork or Dublin, lads and ladies.
But we still haven't decided who's going to win, right?
This weekend, what are they?
I think Jimmy Spithill and Francesco are going to when they get under pressure, it's going to kick off. It's fine when they're winning, all smooth as but the other guys seem to be able to deal with. They've dealt with the pressure and they've stayed together and all as well. But anytime Ross have been under pressure, the friction starts to show, and you can nearly hear Jimmy Spithill saying, "Give me the fucking wheel. I want to drive now."
Yeah. It just can't be an efficient driving way of having two different helms swapping tack to tack. It just the chain of command would no matter how much they work on the communication, you just can't imagine it working properly.
When American Magic capsized that time, I think Jimmy was driving because they were on starboard, and he was going just for the bareway around the mark, and Francesco was saying, no, Jimmy, the race is cancelled. When one boat capsizes, the race is cancelled, and stuff like this. And he was wrong because the umpires had to say that, I think.
Yeah.
Because they're self-riding boats, they can.
Yeah, and they still technically have to finish the race, and I think that's along the same lines of.
Yeah.
Even though the what was it after they still had to start the last race or something, or one of the team like even if there's a race where there's no other team,
right.
You still have to start the race even if the other team is still in the shed on the dock.
I don't think they don't have to finish, but the umpire, as Noel says, has to declare. The boat that's still safe.
Because if the other guys, if Luna Rossa had capsized as well or something had happened,
it would be void then.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. It's
just interesting to see the pressure kind of get to them. You can actually watch. They have a feed on the YouTube where you can just watch with no commentary, the audio and the camera on each boat for the whole race.
It's way better. It's brilliant.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah.
Because you miss out lots of it on the commentary.
I tell you, what's actually brilliant about listening to some of it is the economy of language. No superfluous words at all. They've obviously worked on communication protocol that there are no excess words used. It's brilliant.
Except when they're about to capsize.
There's
a load of chat before that. With what's the second guess and the second guess what they were going.
But it was still compared to some of the bollocks we hear, it was still extraordinarily factual. You know what I mean? The voices were barely raised. There was a call. By the way, I still think that they were right to tack around the bareway. I think
Goodison didn't let off the runner.
Yeah.
No,
there's a max.
Yeah, max.
There's a max.
There's a max ease.
That's what Terry said, but you know.
Yeah, but
Well,
there's a max.
no one has been blamed for that. Who failed to let the runner off?
No, it's not. The runner
gram.
was off.
A gram.
The runner was off.
I know. I'm only joking.
You know what I mean?
I'm only joking. Relax, lads. It's okay.
This is what we like to see. You know, turn over this.
Can I ask a question of the two young guys are here, and I'll tell you something which I'd like your reaction to. There was a very interesting article by Sean Clarkson, who is I think he was into his 5th America's Cup as a grinder, on Magic, and I found this absolutely appalling. And he says, yes, I'm there to coach the guys. And he said, because basically we have 8 athletes. They're just there at the power of the winches. And 2 of the guys, and this is for the Christmas Cup, this was their first yacht race.
Yeah.
I find that is just, you know.
Yeah, this is something I think is equal to like the lack of trickle down anymore. I think it's just unacceptable. You know, if you look back at the ISCC days, you almost wish that was still around, because the likes of like us or other people on this call, like, you know, or like the young pros that are in Ireland at the moment would have a route to go and like focus on being a bowman and becoming, you know, the best of the best and working up and getting to the cup eventually. And there was a lot more routes in because there was bigger teams and, you know, all that kind of stuff. But I think these days you just have to be an animal, or else you have to be one of the best in the world. And there's only two ways into it. You have to be incredibly fit, or you're not getting in, you know.
I agree with that. I think you know, they need. That's the problem with all these grinders and stuff, is that, you know.
Well, I think there's another issue here which I actually think contributed partly to the problem they had, in that you know, when you're at that level and you're competing at that speed, if you don't actually have the experience, then you just don't react to when a problem comes up.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. It's not like, you know, that there's that really famous video from the 2007 Cup where the Kiwis were going downwind and they had to do two spinnaker peels, you know, and that's when you need the people who are going to react and put the new kite up and get the peel ready and all this kind of stuff. But these days, I think the boat's going so fast, if something bad goes wrong, that your rate's over, you know. Yeah. So I don't think they need those people as much anymore to react and fix as you go. You know, what they'll do is they'll just got the call off race, finish the race, and the 4 chase boats will pull up, and those guys will fix it, you know.
Well, I actually wrote an article back in 2017, and it was guest editorial for Scuttlebutt. And this was before any of the bots appeared in the water. We just had some videos of what they might seem or might look like. And I said, look, you know, remember the America's Cup is never about sport. It's never been about sport. It's actually been about, usually, even going back to the days of the 30s, you know, lots of people putting in lots of money and doing different things. But I said, just remember, a Formula One car is not the fastest car on the circuit. And what they've done is you alter the rules so you get things to become interesting. So with a Formula One car, certain parts of the circuit, you're allowed to use what they call SARs. You know, it's a boost to, like a boost to the engine. Right? The other parts, you're not allowed to do boosts. So I said, why not? Because what we actually want to see sailing, and we want to see close sailing. We want to see spinnakers. We want to see peels. We want to see boats bump one another, right? These things are going so fast that if that happened, you'd have a problem. So why not force them as they go around the top mark to actually go, and not just displacement mode as they're in at the moment, but full displacement mode where the foils, and you could have designed this into it back if it had been gone that way 2017, were actually underneath the hull, just like a keel. So they had then to do the run using spinnakers. So there was an extra piece to the whole action where you needed people who knew what they were doing.
Yeah, and I mean it's interesting. Like now the Americans are out. You know, it's not possible. But I think it's also kind of a thought process with the Italians that they do want to go back to those displacement monohulls, and you probably see a boat like, I don't know, maybe a 90-foot TP52 kind of thing if they were to take control, and it would almost open up sailing a little bit more, make it a little bit more interesting again for the sailors. Because at the end of the day, I think the people who have had the last couple of times are trying to do this whole thing of making it appealing to the general public, and to an extent that's good. But I think now that the SailGP, maybe let SailGP do that. Let SailGP be, you know, the face of sailing, the fast, the F1, you know, that have that image. Bring the sailing back to its roots in terms of the America's Cup. It's a sailing competition. You know, bring it back to the sailors. You know, maybe you'll see that.
I think we've gone past the point of no return here, though. I mean, the America's Cup was never about for your average Joe. You look at the J class; they're 135 feet or whatever. Like, they cost millions to build.
Yeah, I would be on the other side of the argument to Will for sure.
Yeah.
I know we've had several arguments about it. That, like as you said, Mark,
I watched.
America's Cup was always very. Sorry, no.
I watched race 2 of the 2007 final last night.
That was amazing.
Boring watched in my life.
Oh, that was amazing.
Oh, it's
The time
unbelievable.
I watched it the first time around, it was brilliant.
It's so good.
It is. But when they passed them down on the last leg after 3.5 hours in 8 knots of breeze, doing 6 knots, like it's very interesting from a sailing nerd point of view. And the first time I watched it live in 2007, I thought it was amazing, the best thing I ever saw. But now compared to this, I mean, neither is really, you know, I mean, it's, as you say, it's a normal boat and you kind of have a chance of getting on board. But really, you know, just as entertainment for a spectacle, like what's happening now is far superior, I think. But it is completely alien. You know, the type of sailing that I do.
It is. Yeah, for that's point of view. But I think one of the great things that we've gotten in this cup that we didn't have in the last 2 editions is back to the basics of an upwind start, where we're seeing what we can of some sort replicate on the water. Like we saw when the American Magic boat was gone for the week and a half. We saw the boys jump back in, and I think they were match racing in J80s, practicing their starts again upwind. So I do understand that, yeah, it is that kind of that unreachable bit for your average Joe sailing. But at the same time, I think what they brought back into this edition of America's Cup, and it helps that the boats have figured out that are equally of standard of some sort, that I think this weekend we are going to see some basic match racing that we all know of some sort. And now that's a 40 knots going downwind regardless. But
I think the more one design they can make it, so they've each of the teams have almost fallen into that same design now. You talked about it a little bit earlier, but I think if you almost made them one design but foiling or very, very fast, it would make it that bit more accessible to get a few more teams in. It kind of breaks down that initial barrier, and it's not really about the boats being accessible, but it's the number of teams, I suppose, that makes it.
Sure, but that's then another whole element of the America's Cup is the design aspect.
Yeah, that's also
similar
true.
to Formula, you're never going to have. In my belief, that you'd never have that fully one design concept.
Yeah, it would ruin it. To be fair,
it would ruin that aspect of it. But I think, sorry, the talk that is coming out that Prof was mentioning there before, that if Ineos or America or Emirates New Zealand defend it again, they're quite keen to keep it in this class of boat, and we'll see the developments established and them selling their current boats to new teams to allow them access to it. Who knows? But I'm very much on Team Tech.
There's one thing it'll never be, guys, and it'll never be one design.
No. That's true.
You know, that's
leave that to SailGP.
Yeah. It'll always be, you know, a tech race, an investment race, and a technology race. But in fairness, like, you know, the foil arms are one design, and you know the rig is kind of broadly one design. You know, the mast itself and stuff. So they've done.
Hey, Prof, what's the difference between the quantum? What are the quantum cloth bits made out of? Like the double skin quantum. You know, the double skin, is it seamed or what? Or do you know?
It's just same old. It's mylar film with carbon strings inside them. You know what I mean? So
yeah, okay.
You know, that's what it is.
They didn't kind of replicate the 3DI somehow, did they?
No.
Do some sort.
Well, in fact, here's an interesting one. They're actually made by Doyle Sales New Zealand. the quantum sails.
Oh, are they?
Yeah. So Doyle and quantum have some sort of a link, going back to the Bellamente days, where quantum asked Doyle to manufacture their stuff and put the quantum badge on it. But it's still mylar film, you know what I mean? So there's still weight in the sail, which is not fiber, it's film, you know, so.
Loads of people are saying that the reason that American Magic capsized was because they had green on the boat, and there's 2 green handles on the back of the boom, and they had green draft stripes, and everyone knows it's really unlucky to have green stuff on a boat. So the quantum logo is green, I think, as well. So, you know, that totally explains it. Yeah.
As I said, I don't blame the guys for tacking around there at all. If you look at
sure Luna Rossa did the same.
No, but like what I'm saying is that American Magic had come off the back of getting beaten in every race so far, and they were winning.
Yeah, exactly.
And like, you know, if you can't tack around in the middle of a gust, you know, it would have been completely anathema, especially as Andrew Campbell said, there's no wind on the right-hand mark.
Right, yeah.
You know what I mean? So like,
yeah, exactly.
So like when you look back at it, given where they were, they just said, no, we're doing this. You know what I mean? So
yeah, I'm sure you can see it in the last race of that Luna Rossa sailed against Ineos. Like, they didn't cover them one tack and they lost.
Yeah.
They were leading the whole, you know, it was nip and tuck, and onto that last leg or whatever, they did, or up that last beat, they didn't cover them on that one tack, and that was game over.
And it was, I mean, that was awesome to watch that race.
It was, yeah, it was great. That was the best race ever.
Yeah, I was there 3 in the morning watching it. It was just, or 4 in the morning, it was fantastic. You know? Anyway, guys, I need to go.
Apparently they changed the grinders every race, like a couple of the grinders.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I got to go, guys.
Thanks a million.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, they definitely, the grinds in the boats, because it's obviously so physical, that they're operating at max heart rate for whatever is 25 minutes. They definitely do. They
don't even look up, apparently. They don't even look up. So.
No. I mean, like, you even see like the aero fairings they put on the Luna Rossa boat now, and the Brits anyway. Like, you know, they're down below the deck level. Like for aeros, they can't see outside. They're just looking down at the screen, and they see how many watts they put. And that's all that matters, you know.
In that 2010 dog match, the BMW boat had a BMW 2-liter diesel engine on board, the same one that's in the 2-liter cars, and that's what provided the power.
Yeah, those are insane. Those boats, the power, you know, like the fact that those limitations was insane.
That's where the power was coming from then, you know, and now it's coming from humans. Same thing, basically.
Yeah. All right, lads, we're going to bounce off. We're going to get some dinner into us. But thank you everyone for joining. Appreciate it. This will end when we log off. So yeah, we'll put in that WhatsApp group maybe next Tuesday. So
yeah, perfect. All right, talk to you guys.
Thanks, guys.
Take care. Thank you.
Bye.